What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Trucker 219. So today was a very interesting day at work. As I was leaving the yard, I heard a crashing sound, and as I got to the end of the driveway, I'd seen that one of our other truck drivers had flipped her truck coming around a corner. So as quickly as I could, I drove over to her truck. I heard her hollering out in pain, freaking out, rightfully so, you just flipped a truck. And I look through the front window and I see that she's still hanging from her seatbelt, and her feet had slid out from underneath of where the driver's seat would be. And she was hollering out, "Help, I need help." So I said, "It's all right, I'm here, I got you. Let me climb up onto the truck and help you out. You're gonna be okay, you're fine, just take a deep breath." My first thought was, how do I get this glass out of the windshield? But it was pretty solid in there, only one side had a little crack in it. So instead I began climbing up a sideways engine. And this truck had just been running, so I wanted to be careful for my safety as well, to where I'm not burning myself on a hot exhaust pipe or anything like that. So I'm being cautious, climbing up to the side of the truck. Well, I finally get to the top, and as I'm looking down in there, I see that she's still hanging and she's still freaking out. Now, when I say hanging, I'm not saying by the neck. Her seatbelt was around her shoulder and her waist, and she was still just kind of dangling there. So I opened up the driver's side door, which is now the roof of the vehicle. She said, "I think it's starting to cut off some of my circulation." So I reached behind her and pressed the seatbelt latch, and luckily her feet were already pretty close to the passenger's door, which is now the bottom of the truck. Once she was safely on the passenger's door, I called my dispatch to let them know what happened, because I know that's the path that all of our truck drivers take when we're coming back to the yard. So I wanted to make sure no other dump trucks were coming around that curve, as well as make sure there was somebody else calling 911 while I was helping right there. Now, my big concern with being in this spot is it was taking up both lanes on a tiny country back road, and where she had flipped was just right around the corner. So my main concern was other cars coming around that corner not paying attention. So I was trying to focus on her as well as focus on these other cars coming from the opposite direction. She was in a little bit of a panic, rightfully so. I said, "Just breathe, it's all right, it's gonna be okay, you're alive. I'm thankful that you're alive. That's all you need to worry about right now." And just as I finished my attempt to calm her down, I heard another car starting to come around the corner. So I immediately stood up and waved my hands to make sure that they seen me in my bright yellow shirt. This is the same shirt I was wearing, and they could see me and know to slow down. Luckily they did, and the traffic began to back up behind them. Now, mind you, this is a country road, so it's not a ton of traffic coming through there, but enough to where there was a couple of cars backed up, and I felt safe to proceed with trying to get her out of there. A couple other people started to come around and make sure everything was all right. The driver, she gathered her belongings and started handing them out, and I handed them to those other people that were standing around to lay out on the ground. And once she was through getting her important things out of the truck, we began getting her out of the truck. And if you haven't seen my stories from states from Kentucky, I've actually been in this same situation, except for I was the driver, so I kind of understood what needed to take place. And having been through that, I also know how disorientating it is to sit in a truck or stand on a passenger side door. Everything is not in the right spot. So I started giving her pointers of where to step. So I said where the cup holders are, that's a great spot to step, as well as the compartment above the driver's side seat, that's a good spot to step as well. The steering wheel, the side of the seat, and eventually we got her to where she could sit on the side of the truck, which again was now the roof of the truck. At this point, there was about 5 other people that had gathered around. I was still standing on the side of the truck helping her get out. And one of those 5 people was a nurse practitioner. And she hollered out, "Hey, I'm a nurse practitioner. Is there anything I could do to help? Is she okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I think she's gonna be all right. We're just working on trying to get her out of the truck." So a couple other guys were down there helping out, and they were able to let her slide off of the roof of the truck down to the ground. They helped her get down. I helped her from up top. Once she was on the ground, the nurse practitioner started to check her out. Once the nurse practitioner was taking care of her, making sure she was all right, checking her out as much as she could, I went to the back side of the truck to make sure that the traffic that was there knew that, hey, it's going to be a while. You might want to turn around and go back the way you came. And over there, I found another guy who had already taken it upon himself to call 911. So shout out to that guy. Around that time, I had received another call from dispatch letting me know, hey, there's emergency on the way. The owner of the company is right around the corner. He'll be there in just a second to help out, and also wanted to check and make sure that the driver was all right. And I assured him, yeah, I think she's going to be okay. She might have some bruises and bumps, but I think she's going to be all right. Soon after that, the owner of the company arrived and we started talking a little bit. I let him know kind of what happened as much as I could, and he went about his business of taking pictures of the scene and making sure that all the insurance information was available for the police officers and the other first responders that were going to be arriving. And about 5 minutes later, the first responders started rolling in. First was a police officer, then a rescue fire truck, then another police officer, then an ambulance, and before we knew it, there was 5 or 6 vehicles there ready to help out. And they began doing their thing, asking the driver some questions, asking the owner some questions, and being that I was the first on the scene, I wanted to make sure I stayed and gave any report that they needed from my perspective. Luckily, after the EMTs checked her out, she was going to be okay. So, how did this happen? Well, the yard where we park is just a concrete pad out in the middle of nowhere. Being that the pad is out in the middle of the country, you have to traverse windy, tight roads. And even the owner of the company himself said these lanes are not wide enough for trucks. They need to widen these roads. And it turns out this isn't the first truck that has come around that corner and ended up in an accident. So when she was coming around the curve, her passenger side steer tire went over the edge of the road a little bit. And based off of the markings on the ground, it looks like she overcorrected, and when she overcorrected, it shot her across the other side of the road to an upwards embankment. She rode up the embankment, which caused the truck to flip over on its side. So how do we prevent these accidents in the future? Well, the number one thing is slow down when you're going through curves. Also, if you're traversing tight country roads, in my opinion, it's best to actually be a little bit in the other lane so you're not off the side of the road. And when a car approaches or you see a car in the distance, move back to your lane and give them space. And another issue specifically here in the South, I live in Tennessee, is that a lot of these roads have zero shoulder. There's the line and then that's the end of the road. I think if the roads had a little bit of a shoulder, then it would prevent a lot of these issues from happening. Because whether or not it was this road or another road, a lot of times dump trucks are not heading into the most well-maintained areas. They're going to places that are new constructions, gravel is being placed in certain spots, or they're removing dirt from different areas. And sometimes the roads aren't even paved yet. They're just dirt roads until they are able to grade the ground properly and add pavement. So in my opinion, I think that there should be some new regulation on road width. Now I understand some roads can't be as wide as others, but I think any road that's not a one-way should have an opportunity or a space for a driver to pull off on when they need to find an out. But at the end of the day, I'm glad that the driver was safe. I'm super thankful for citizens that are willing to jump out and help and volunteer their services to try to make sure that everybody's all right and that everybody is safe. I'm also really thankful for the first responders that showed up in a very timely manner, and they always show up in bulk around the area that I live. From the police officers to the rescue squad to the EMTs, they all did a fantastic job checking on the driver and making sure she was okay. But let me know down in the comments what you think. Should roads be wider? What would you do if your truck flipped on its side? And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. All right? Bye.